My name is Adara Nwosu, at least that is the name everybody knows me by, but the truth is my real name is Nena Ibe. 15 years ago, I was nobody. I was just a young girl from Enugu who was struggling to survive. My parents were poor, my father a tailor, and my mother sold roasted yam by the roadside. After NYSC, I tried to find work in Abuja, but life there was hard. I was tired of hearing people say, "We'll call you." They never did. I had nothing, no job, no money, no hope. That morning, I boarded a small bus from Enugu to Abuja. The sun was hot, and I remember holding my nylon bag tight to my chest, praying silently that things would change for me one day. There was a young woman sitting by my side, quiet and beautiful. She smelled of foreign perfume. She had this fine wristwatch that sparkled in the sun, and her nails were well painted. Her name was Adara Nwosu. We talked a little during the trip. She told me she was going to Abuja too, to meet her parents after a long time away. She had this gentle way of talking, like someone that never suffered. I admired her and wished I could be like her. Then it happened. Somewhere after Lokoja, our driver tried to overtake a trailer on a narrow road. I can still hear the sound in my head. The loud horn, the scream, the crash, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. My body was covered in bandages and my face was swollen. I could hardly move. A nurse came in and said, "Thank God you're awake, Madam Adaora." I didn't understand what she meant. I wanted to say, "My name is Nena," but my lips were too heavy to move. They said the other woman, the real Adaora, had died instantly. Days turned into weeks. Nobody came looking for me, not my parents, not anyone. The doctor said my face was badly damaged, but that I would recover. They kept calling me Adaora, and at first I tried to correct them, but the words never came out. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was confusion. Then one evening, a nurse brought a man to my bedside. He looked rich, with gold watch and fine clothes. "This is your father," she said with a smile. The man looked at me, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "My daughter, Adaora, you're alive." Something broke inside me that day. I wanted to tell him the truth, but when I saw the way he held my hand crying, I just couldn't. It felt like the world was offering me another life, one I never had. So I stayed quiet, and that was how I began to live a borrowed life. When I finally left the hospital, I wasn't the same person that entered it. My face had healed, though not completely. They said I was lucky to be alive. They said Adaora was a miracle. I just nodded, pretending to remember the things they said I should remember. The man who called himself my father took me to a big house in Ikoyi. It was the kind of house I had only seen in films: tall gate, flowers by the entrance, and people who opened doors for you. Everyone there called me Miss Adaora. They hugged me and cried, saying, "Thank God our daughter didn't die." I didn't know any of them, but I played along. I smiled when they smiled. I cried when they cried. Inside me, my heart was shaking. I kept asking myself, "Nena, what are you doing here?" But each time I thought about going back to Enugu, I remembered the hunger, the rejection, the pain. Then I would whisper to myself, maybe God wants to bless you through this mistake. They said I had lost my memory because of the accident, so they didn't expect me to remember much. That lie helped me. Whenever they asked me something I didn't know, I would touch my head and say softly, "I'm trying to remember." Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Slowly, I started to live like Adaora. I learned how to walk with my shoulders straight, how to eat with a fork and knife, how to smile without showing all my teeth. They sent me abroad for treatment, and when I came back, even I could hardly recognize myself. The mirror showed a different woman. Soft skin, fine hair, and clothes that could buy a whole street in Enugu. Sometimes guilt would whisper to me. It would say, "You are living another person's life." But I would answer it in my heart, "She is gone, and I am here." Why waste the life she left behind? I built my new self carefully. I went back to school, studied interior design, and opened a company. People called me Madam Adaora, the designer. My name was in newspapers, my pictures on posters. I even started helping poor girls, maybe to make myself feel less guilty. But no matter how far I went, the voice of Nena never left me. At night, I would dream of that road, that crash, that quiet girl with the perfume who smiled at me before everything went dark. And sometimes, when I looked in the mirror, I could swear it was her face staring back at me, not mine. Then one morning, as I sat in my office drinking tea, My secretary walked in and said, "Ma, a young man is here to see you. He says he's your brother, Obinanwosu." My hand froze. The spoon fell from my fingers and hit the cup. My past had finally found me. When the secretary said, "your brother," my heart almost stopped beating. I forced a smile and told her to send him in. My palms were sweating even before the door opened. Then he walked in, tall, dark, well-dressed. His face carried that kind of quiet confidence that rich children have. He looked at me with eyes full of emotion, and before I could say a word, he said, "Ada, my sister." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He walked closer and hugged me tightly. His perfume filled the room. My mind was spinning. I had never seen this man in my life, but the way he held me, the way his voice broke when he said my name, it felt real. I stood stiff in his arms, then slowly hugged him back. "Obina," I said softly, pretending to remember. "It's been so long." He stepped back and smiled. "I thought I'd lost you forever," he said. "After Daddy and Mummy died, I told myself I must find you. I couldn't rest." I sat down quickly before my legs gave way. "You found me," I managed to say, forcing a laugh. He looked around my office, impressed. "You did well for yourself, Ada. Even in America, I heard of your company." My chest tightened. America? So the real Adaora had a brother living abroad. I didn't know how long I could keep pretending. He spent almost 2 hours in my office, telling stories from their childhood about their mother's cooking, their father's laughter, the family dog called Bruno. I nodded and smiled, but I didn't know any of it. When he finally left, my legs were shaking. I locked the door and sat on the floor, my head in my hands. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. That evening, I called Ngozi, the only person who knew my secret. She'd been my friend before the accident, the one who visited me in the hospital years ago and told me to accept the new life. "Bang," I said, my voice trembling. "He found me." "Adaora's brother." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You knew this day would come. You can't hide forever." "I can't lose everything," I whispered. "Not after all these years." "You're already losing it, Nena," she said quietly, piece by piece. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept remembering the accident, the mistake, the choice I made. The next morning, Obina called again, saying he wanted to introduce me to someone, a journalist who wanted to write about the miracle woman who survived the crash years ago. My stomach turned. I smiled into the phone and said, "Of course," but when I dropped the call, my hands were shaking so hard that the phone fell to the ground. I knew it then. My borrowed life was starting to expire. The day Obina brought the journalist, I felt like the air itself was watching me. Her name was Amara, a young woman with sharp eyes that looked like they could see through your thoughts. She smiled politely, but there was something about her that made my chest tighten. "Mrs. Nwosu," she began, switching on her recorder, "your story has inspired so many, surviving such an accident and rebuilding your life from it. It's almost unbelievable. Unbelievable." That word stung. I smiled and said softly, "God gave me a second chance." As she asked her questions, I kept my answers short. I didn't want to say too much, but she was clever. She kept circling back to the accident, how it happened, where I was going that day, who I was traveling with. Each question dug deeper, like she was peeling my life open layer by layer. At a point, I caught Obina watching me closely, his smile fading. He was beginning to notice my nervousness. My hands trembled as I reached for my glass of water. After the interview, Amara stood to leave, but turned and said, "Madam, one last thing. The hospital where you were treated, do you remember the name?" My throat went dry. I forced a smile and said, "It's been so long, my dear. I can't remember." She nodded slowly, that same sharp look in her eyes. "No problem," she said, and left. That night I told Ngozi everything. She didn't even let me finish before shouting, "You see, I told you this day would come. The truth doesn't stay buried forever, Nena. Tears burned my eyes. What do I do now? Tell the truth before it swallows you," she said quietly. "You've built a mansion on a grave." But I couldn't. I had worked too hard, suffered too much. I told myself I could fix it, maybe pay the journalist off, maybe confuse her story. But by the next week, things got worse. Obina came to my house looking angry. He threw some papers on the table, old hospital records. "Ada, why does this file say your blood type doesn't match our family's? Why does it say patient unidentified?" My mouth went dry. "Obina, please let me explain." "Explain what?" he shouted. "That my real sister died 15 years ago." I froze. He knew. Somehow he had found out. I tried to speak, but words refused to come out. Chike, my husband, came into the living room and heard everything. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. What's he talking about, Adaora? My legs gave way. I fell to the floor, crying, the truth spilling out like water from a broken pot. My name is not Adaora. I'm Nena Ibe. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Chike stepped back slowly. So who did I marry? He whispered. The world I had borrowed was falling apart right before my eyes. That night, after everything came out, my house felt like a cold grave. Chike didn't say another word to me. He packed a small bag, looked at me one last time and said quietly, I don't know who you are anymore. Then he left. I sat on the floor till morning, staring at nothing. The walls that used to protect me now felt like they were laughing at me. My phone kept ringing. Journalists, friends, business partners. Everyone had heard the story. It was already on the news. Famous designer exposed for living under another woman's identity. By afternoon, my company board sent me a letter. They asked me to step down until further notice. Clients started withdrawing their contracts. The same people who once called me Madame Adaora now avoided my calls. But the worst part was Obinna. He came to see me one more time. He looked tired, his face pale. Why, Nena? He asked quietly. Why did you do it? Tears filled my eyes. I didn't plan it, Obinna. That day at the hospital, they thought I was your sister. I tried to tell them, but no one listened. Then your father came, crying, calling me Adaora. I couldn't destroy his joy. I couldn't. He shook his head. You could have said the truth later. I know, I whispered. But by then it was too late. Everything I ever wanted was suddenly in front of me. Comfort, respect, peace. I was tired of suffering. I didn't mean to steal your sister's life. I just borrowed it. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes softening. You can't borrow a soul, Nena. The price is always too heavy. He left without another word. After that day, I made a decision. I went to the press and told them everything myself. No hiding, no lies. I told the world who I really was, Nena Ibe, the girl who once sat by Adaora Nwosu on a bus and survived where Adaora didn't. I apologized to the Nwosu family, to my husband, to everyone I deceived. Some people insulted me, some pitied me, but for the first time in 15 years, I slept peacefully. Weeks later, I received a letter from the Nwosu family's lawyer. It said they were dropping all charges. At the end of the letter was one short line written by Obinna himself. You lived as our sister with grace. We forgive you. Rest her name now. That day, I packed my bags and left Lagos. I went back to Enugu, to my roots. I rented a small shop and started again, this time under my real name. The signboard outside read, Nena's Touch, Interior Designs. Business was slow at first, but I was free. No lies, no fear, no pretending. Sometimes I visit Adora's grave. I bring flowers and sit quietly. The wind always feels calm there. I whisper to her, I borrowed your life, Adora, and it almost destroyed me. Thank you for the time I had. Rest now. Then I walk away, not as Adaora the designer, not as Madame Nwosu's daughter, but as myself. Nena Ibe, the woman who finally learned that no matter how beautiful another person's life looks, it's never yours to borrow. And for the first time, that felt enough.